Here we go. If you've got your Bibles, I want you to open to the book of Job. Open to the book of Job. There's been a lot of talk about the book of Job. And I was going to just kid with you and say, I'm going to teach this morning with a chip on my shoulder about some stuff y'all have said about this book. But I'm really not. I'm kidding. But let me just tell you this. I love the book of Job. It's always been one of my favorite books. And so when I hear people say, man, I'm struggling through Job, oh man, Job, and my best friend posts, hashtag gonna find love for the middle, because she said, I love the beginning of the book, I love the end of the book, but I struggle through the middle. I think we're missing something in the book of Job. I think there is so much to be found and to be dug into in the book of Job, and I think that for us to be like, oh, Job, God, 42 chapters of arguing, and these crazy, ridiculous friends, I think we're missing it. I really do. And so I was reading yesterday, and I was reading our blog, and if you're not looking at our blog, it's interesting. I just stopped yesterday because I thought if I say anything else, it'll be into our Sunday school lesson. So let me just not say anything else. But if you're not looking into that blog, I think it's great. I think it's getting people engaged and then interested in reading, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm thankful that Tiffany put that together for us. But Job is actually a really, really, really good book, and I think it's got some really good stuff. And here's what I want to do. This morning, I want to teach about lessons from Eliphaz. I don't think that the whole book of Job was put together. I don't think God allowed 42 chapters to be written just to make one point of, yeah, Job's friends were crazy. I honestly don't think that. I think that while even God himself had a rebuke for his friends. Now, I'm letting you know that I'm not crazy this morning. I read the back. I read the last chapter, and at the last chapter, if you want to go ahead and turn over, we can look at that. So I tell you, I'm aware of this. In the last chapter of Job, Job chapter 42, it says in verse number 7, after the Lord had spoken unto Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz, he said, my wrath is kindled against you. He said, and against your two friends, you have not spoken of me the thing that is right. I'm aware of that. Okay? I'm aware of that. But I do not think that God is saying, everything you boys said was a lie. You should have never gone down there, and I'm not happy with anything you said. I don't think that's the case. I think that what you have in Job's three friends is you have a classic scenario of people who do this. Listen to me. They do speak truth. They speak truth, and they speak just enough truth that people don't just shut you down and cast you out because they say, you're a liar, get out of here. They speak truth. But then they also cross the line of throwing in other things. Their thoughts about what they think God is doing and why they think God is doing different things. I think Job's three friends are the classic example of that. They did speak truth, though. Let me tell you that. I think that as I read yesterday in the devotion and the day before, the lessons that you can learn from Eliphaz are phenomenal. That man knew some truth, let me tell you. And so I said as I started this, hey, we've cast Job's friends off like those bunch of goons. They said curse God. No, they did not. No. Hang on now. And the whole book of Job, we don't just chalk it up to, like I said, 42 chapters of a bunch of senseless arguing. And man, if you got friends like that, who needs enemies? I don't think that's the whole point of the book of Job. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge you this morning to look at Eliphaz again. And I've picked out some advice that Eliphaz gave that I think he nailed. And I asked God last night, one more time before I went to bed, I said, God, am I wrong? I've never really looked at it this way. Nobody else seems to think, as looking at the blog, nobody else seems to think Job's friends had anything to say. Everybody else seems to think they're crazy and he didn't need friends like that. I said, God, am I wrong? Don't let me stand up there and teach this if I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm going to challenge your thinking this morning as I think that God challenged mine last night. And here's what I hope it's going to do too, and this is going to be good for y'all. I think it's going to change the way you read Job. Don't just muddle through Job like this argument. And then he said this, and he said, Lord of mercy, chapter 20, chapter 30, when can I think it's going to challenge us to look at the book in a different direction, and that's going to be good for us. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to open your Bible to the book of Job, and I want you to start in Job chapter 2. And I meant what I said yesterday when I said everybody hates on Job's friends, but I want you to pause for a minute. Do you have one friend who would come to you when you have experienced disaster, for lack of a better word, and would sit with you 7 days, 7 nights, and never say a word? I don't know that I've got a friend like that. Okay, there's several seats. I don't know that I've got a friend like that, just to be honest. And so I want to look at that verse again. It's in Job chapter 2. I want you to look at verse number 13. It says, so they sat down with him upon the ground. Now, I don't know about you. I broke my tailbone years ago. Sitting on the ground is painful, man. I can't sit on the ground. It's tough. And I just thought that adds an extra element. His friends didn't come over and sit in the recliner eating all the snacks while Job was in there laying in the bed crying. They sat on the ground with him. And it also says in verse number 12, it says, they rent their clothes. They sprinkled dust on their head. And they sat on the ground with him, and they sat there for 7 days and 7 nights, and none of them spoke a word to him. Why? It says they saw that his grief was very great. We don't have to come to an anonymous or a unanimous answer. We don't have to agree on this. That's a friend. That's a friend. That's 3 good friends. They came and they sat there, and for a week they pained themselves with ashes. They sat on the ground and they did not say a word. As Job, his grief was very great. And he continued to, look at what he does in chapter number 3. For a chapter, it says that Job opened his mouth, not his mouth, he opened his mouth up like, come on, he opened his mouth, and it says he cursed his day. And for a whole chapter, 26 verses, Job cursed his day. Lord, why couldn't I have just been dead in the womb? Why couldn't I have been a stillborn child? Lord, why on the day that they said there's going to be a man born named Job, why couldn't that have just never happened, Lord? And listen to me. I'm not lacking empathy. This man lost his 10 children and everything he had. I get that kind of grief. I do. I do. But Job speaks for 26 chapters, and then chapter 4. I want you to look at chapter 4. Eliphaz and the other 2, Bildad and Zophar, they had sat on the ground, sharing the same agony and sharing the same discomfort as Job had for 7 days and 7 nights. They never said a word. And in chapter 4, Eliphaz speaks. Now listen to me what I said that I know to be true about Job's friends. At the end of the book, God said, my anger is kindled against you 3 for what you have done. Now listen to me. They did not speak all lies about God. They didn't do it. They did the classic that I told you earlier. They had truth mixed with opinion. That's a problem when you're talking about God's Word. And God said, my wrath is against you. You said some things about me that weren't true. Let me tell you something. If you say 10 things about God, 9 of them are true and 1 of them's a lie, there's a problem with that. That's what happened with Job's 3 friends. But here's what we cannot do, and I'm saying this again. You can't just trash everything. If everything should have been trashed, then it never should have been recorded in the book of Job. If it was all just filthy lies, then it never should have been recorded. But there was truth. And what I did as I read is I thought, Lord, show me some truth. Eliphaz was a good man. He was a friend to Job. Yeah, he threw in an opinion. And let me ask you, before we get too hard, do we not do that same thing when we're trying to help people sometimes? We say, I love you, man. I love you. And look, the Lord's got this. And then we say, hey, the Lord's good and He's merciful and He's gracious. And then Now, he ain't just going to let you just la 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 la. Now, let me tell you something that I know about the Lord. Now he ain't going to. And don't we start putting words in God's mouth? And don't we inadvertently, come on, we're women. Don't we have an opinion about everything? Don't we really think we know why people are suffering? I mean, they're just not going to own up to it. But Lord, I'll tell you, I mean, I know what she did 15 years ago. She ain't hiding nothing from me. I went to school with that girl. Oh, no. She don't know why she's suffering. Let me tell you, God don't allow. Hey. God will not let.
Oh my God. She has been in her life. That's why.
Oh, she showed us. Oh. You will reap what you sow. All she's doing is reaping, honey. Oh, honey.
Oh my gosh, you just don't own it.
I'm being honest. Oh, but Job's friends, boy, they're trash. Boy, they came in there and they had nothing. To be honest, their advice sounds a lot like mine. They gave a lot of truth, but then they also threw in some of their opinions. And hey, God's opinion of them is just like it is of me when I do that. He said, I got some wrath against you. You said something about me that was not true. And we'll address that later. But for this morning, I'm telling you that Eliphaz, he spoke some truth. And I don't want us to miss over it because we're just trudging with sewage boots on trying to get through the book of Job because it's so drudgery. I mean, it's just like pulling teeth to get through. I mean, there's some good stuff in here, and I want us to see it. Here's 2 seats right here by the teacher. Come on, teacher's pet.
You know, some of them too, they just wanted to see all them bulls on him.
Oh,
They probably thought, he go see what this thing look like. I bet they ain't as bad as everybody says they are. I'm gonna go check it out. And then they got there,
y'all are hard on his friend. I'm going to go back to saying, if I had a friend who would sit with me for 7 days, 7 nights on the floor and not say a word to me, they were just there to comfort me. That's what. Y'all got friends like that?
no, but they probably didn't know what to
See,
say.
she's always going, y'all, but. No, but. No, but. You got a poor image of these friends, and I want to change that image this morning. Some friends. You want me to run through that? What now?
It was funny.
Oh, whatever. Hush. Anyway, and so if you look at the book of Job, I'm telling you, there's some truth in here, and we need an extra chair. I'm excited. I'm going to drag this couch over here. She's going to
I'll sit in the middle of the floor, tell you a little bit about myself. I'm always late.
Well, here, we're going to squeeze whoever comes in.
We're going to make one for you, though.
Y'all, the parking lot is so full. Let it.
Here, get up here on the seat.
Let me just be in the hot seat.
I'm glad you're here. All right, now y'all are going to like this. I'm telling you, if you'll get over your bad image of his friends. So, but for this morning, I ain't letting y'all off the hook. No, Eliphaz has got some good stuff to say. And we're going to hear it. And I want to say again, because these people who come in, I want you to catch this. They had a mix. Job's 3 friends, there was a mixture. They did speak some truth. But they also threw in opinion. So I don't want you sitting there saying, well, it's funny. God said he didn't like what they said, but Jennifer said that what they said was fine. God did not like the fact that they mixed a little truth with a lot of opinion. Hey, is that not where we are in America anyway? People aren't just straight up telling lies. They're not. And people who have got big congregations, they're giving just enough truth that people think, I'm getting truth. But then they're mixing in enough opinions that the wrath of God is saying, whoa now, brother, you're saying stuff I didn't say. Let me tell you something, and then we'll move on. God said, you've implied that living for me equals easy street. You've implied that a life of sin brings suffering. That's not true. Let me tell you, there's 100 preachers in America that are saying living a life for God equals easy street and it equals prosperity. They did the same thing here that we're still doing now. But here's my thing. There is still some truth, and I don't want us to miss that. And what I want you to do is as you continue to read, I want you to read and say, now where's the truth? Because they did speak some truth, and then what's opinion? And if you can read it that way, you'll love the reading. Oh, I think that's actually truth when I look at it. Now that's opinion. And you'll be able to dissect the word like that. Now let's look at something that Eliphaz said. Eliphaz says in chapter 4, Job chapter 4, after Job's cursed the day he's died, the day he was born, he's cursed his day for a whole chapter. Eliphaz says, we could all sit here and not talk. He said, but who can withhold himself from speaking? Look at verse number 3. I want you to listen to the first piece that I think is great truth that Eliphaz said to Job. He said, behold, thou hast instructed many, and thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was falling. Thou hast strengthened the feeble knees, but now it is come upon thee, and thou faintest. He said, it toucheth thee, and thou art troubled. Now let me pause here. If Eliphaz said that in a snarky attitude, kind of like this, maybe like, oh, Job, you're the first one who's given your advice to everybody else, brother. Oh, you've helped other people when they were weak. And that's what he said. Now listen to what he said. He said, but here's the thing. Can you take tone from reading black and white? I can't.
No.
I think I can, but I can't. And maybe he said, oh, your words have lifted up the one that was fallen. Oh, you've been the one to strengthen feeble knees, but here you are, biggin'. And look at verse number 5. Now it's come on you. Oh, yeah, now it's come on you. And you're fainting. And it touches you, and now you're troubled. Now, if he said it like that, then I'm sure that Job thought, wow, go back home. I mean, why did you come to tell me that? But I don't know that that was his tone. But let me ask you, is that not good advice that he gave? Listen to what he said again. He said, you've instructed many people. You have strengthened weak hands. Verse number 4. Your words have lifted up the ones who were falling. You've strengthened feeble knees. And now it's touching you, my friend, and you're fainting. He said it's come to you now, and you're troubled. That's good advice.
That sounds better.
That's good advice.
But what's the advice?
The advice is that you heed to your own advice. He said, you've strengthened others. Now let me put it in our terms. Okay, you said to a friend, hey, you're in a marriage that's struggling. God's enough. He can put it back together. Have you not? Mm-hmm. You said to a friend with a wayward child, you pray, you turn it over to the Lord, you ask Him, He'll draw him back. Your finances are a wreck. God will help you. You're dealing with this. God will be enough. God will be enough. You've given that advice, right? Mm-hmm. Now what happens when it's you?
Yeah.
He's saying he needs to do what
he said, he said, you've been the one who's... Let me tell you something. 2-3 weeks ago, I taught a lesson. I said we can wake up in the morning and we can find 1,000 reasons to be grumpy and angry and walk through our day feeling bitter, or we can do what the psalmist David says. He said, praise waits for you, Lord. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to praise you. And he gave reasons. He said, you hear my prayer, you forgive my sins, you've done this and this and this and this. And do you know that every day after I taught that lesson, I woke up feeling like a grizzly bear every darn day. I was in the worst mood of my life. Do you know what my best friend said to me? You know what my best friend, Tina McDowell, you know what she said to me? You go back and you listen to your lesson on Facebook. That's good advice. That's good advice. That's not easy advice. I said, you're right. You're right. She said, you said that you can... Now, what's different in Tina McDowell advising Jennifer Tucker and Eliphaz saying to Job, brother, it's all about, wouldn't you agree, it's not about what you say, it's in the way you say it. Well, why do we read everything they say with a snarky attitude? A man who traveled and sat for 7 days beside a friend and said not a word is a friend. And he said, man, I'm going to tell you something, Job. Why do we have to hear it snarkily said? And maybe he did, I don't know. But what if he said, listen to me, what if he said, you've instructed many people. You've helped many people, Job. You've strengthened weak hands. Your words have held up those that were fallen. You've strengthened the feeble knees, but now, man, it's on you. And he said, and you're fainting. It's touched you and you're troubled. Isn't that good advice that a friend ought to tell you? Hey, heed your own advice. And I want you to think, I'm glad Laurel asked that. Now you think about times you've done that. Mm-hmm. Somebody passes away, what do we say? Trust in the Lord. It's going to be all right. He's going to bring you through this. His grace will be there for you. We know He's in a better place. And then our meemaw dies. No, the world is it's terrible. I can't go on anymore. Well, you told everybody else it'd be fine. You told everybody else the Lord would be there. I mean, you know. When it was somebody else's kid that you thought was just far out there, you told them the Lord could do that. Now what about when it's your own kid? Can you take your own advice? Job or Ashley or Tiffany? Now that you've given these same words to everybody else, brother, friend, can you take your own advice? Don't let trouble come on your life and then you crumble under it. Let me tell you something. This is real to a teacher. This is real to a teacher. And it's hard because my best friend says stuff like that. You need to go back and listen to your own lesson. But isn't that a truth? If you can tell it to other people, then let it be real in your own life. Do you not think that's real for Blake, for Tiffany? When they sit and they counsel with people, or Blake would advise somebody and say, hey, you give it to the Lord. I'm sure he advises in those ways. He's got it. He can take care of this. You think that's easy for Blake when Blake has his own problems then? Oh, you're fine, Blake. Lord's got it. He's going to take care of this. It's not that way. It's not that way, and you know that, right? So you just nod. You don't have to say a word. Did Eliphaz maybe nail it with some good advice right there? Mm-hmm. Oh, really? No, let's turn over. Continue reading in Job chapter 4. He might have embellished it a little bit. Right there in verse 13, he said, in thoughts from the visions of the night when deep sleep falls on men, he said, a spirit passed in front of my face and the hair on my arm stood up and I was so terrified. And he was telling me this about you, Job. Maybe he did embellish that. Okay. I do that sometimes too. I do that sometimes too when I'm talking to my friends. I kind of say, hey, the Lord, he told me now. And maybe he embellished it. Okay, but we're not going to cast out everything he said, because look at what Eliphaz said to Job in verse number 17. He asked a question here. I think it's good. That's a good question to consider. In verse number 17, he said, shall mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his Maker? He said he put no trust in his servants. His angels he charged with folly. How much less in them that dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust? We're just made of dust. He said, which are crushed before the moth. Look at the question that he asked Job. He said, shall mortal man be more just than God? Now, being more just means you're more right. And then he says, or is a man more pure, like cleaner, better than his Maker? Now listen to me. The answer to that question is obviously what? No. We're not more just than God. By no means are we cleaner than He is. And you would say, oh, what audacity to even ask that question. But let me ask you this. You ever question God's plans for your life? You ever say, Lord, I'm telling you something. I don't know why you did it that way. It would have made so much more sense if you'd have just done this right here. You didn't have to take that person. You did not have to. Oh, we're instructing God, huh? Oh, our plans were better than His, huh? So we're more just than the Maker of the universe, and we're more pure than God Himself. It's exactly what we are implying when we question God's plans. And I'll tell you, here I stand here a guilty party. I stood in this Sunday school class 6 weeks ago and I said, I'm really struggling as to why God allowed the house to burn down. I said, those people had nothing to begin with. Then their house burns and now they got nothing. And my own words, I'm sure they're recorded somewhere, I said, I'm really struggling with God allowing that to happen. Well, I wouldn't say it, but do you know what that implies? That I'm more just than He is. That my plans are purer than His. And I'm going to be honest. Or I shouldn't speak for you. I should ask you. Have you ever done that? You ever sat around thinking, God, I'm telling you, you should have asked me. If you'd have just asked me, God, I had such a better plan for all this. You could have done it this way. And are you not implying, aren't you doing it, that you are more just than God is? And you know why Eliphaz said that to Job? Because don't you think the temptation of Job would have been to have said, God, you did this, and I don't know that you should have done this. And wouldn't that be him implying that he is more just than God is? And that he's more pure than his very own Maker? Isn't that some pretty good advice to hear from a friend that, hey, let's be reminded that if we stop to question God's plan, and if we question it and we think ours is better, we are inadvertently implying that we're purer than our very own Maker. And I don't know about you, but old Eliphaz kind of convicted me on that one right there. And he made me feel convicted and made me feel guilty because I have done that very thing. Now, just kind of nod you. I mean, you think that's some pretty good advice Eliphaz gave? Think that's a pretty good question? Job, is a man more pure than his Creator? Is mortal man more just than God Himself? And we would say the audacity to even think that. But we do that when we question God's plan. I think that's good advice. Do you? Y'all still with me here? Is this challenging our thinking about how we've read Eliphaz's words? Maybe just a little? Let's go into chapter 5. Eliphaz keeps speaking, and here's what he said. Verse number 7, I thought, you right there too, brother. Boy, you good. You better than people give you credit for. It's quoting Rodney Dawes' voice. You good now. You good. He said, that's why I looked at you. Look at what he says in chapter number 5. He said, verse number 7, man is born into trouble as the sparks fly upward. I got a question for you. You ever lit a fire in a fire pit? You ever roasted marshmallows over a fire? I got one question for you. When you put fire on that pit or whatever, and you make a bonfire, and you poke that fire, or you throw something in it, I got one question for you. Do the sparks fly upward? If you say no, they don't fly upward, you're saying no. Sparks go down. So let me just ask you something. Do sparks fly upward? They do. Is man going to experience trouble? Yes, just as certainly. Sounds like Eliphaz knew a little bit about life. He said, man is born into trouble as the sparks fly upward. Just as sure as you light a fire and you poke a stick in it and a spark is going to fly upward, life is going to be full of trouble. There's some truth to that. I don't want people who get saved thinking that when I get on God's team, Mosley, don't think I'm signing up for Easy Street and it's going to be a bowl of cherries now. It's going to be wonderful. Hey, man is born into trouble. And walking with Jesus, listen, it doesn't take you out of that trouble. It gives you somebody to walk through that trouble with. But Eliphaz nailed it when he said in verse number 7, man is born into trouble as sure as the sparks fly upward. But look at what he said in verse number 8. I would seek unto God, and unto God would I commit my cause. I think that's good advice. You say, well, oh yeah, he says he'd seek the Lord. Let me ask you something. When troubles come to people, do they just naturally, automatically turn to the Lord? I would not say yes, they do. No, not all the time. Sometimes people will turn and run away from God in times of trouble. So I think that Eliphaz's statements here that he said to Job were so true, so accurate, and such good advice. He said, hey, life is going to be about trouble just as sure as sparks fly upward. But here's what I would do, my friend. I would seek God. He said, and you can imply that the opposite is not true. He said, I wouldn't run away from Him. I would seek Him. And I would commit my cause to Him. Do you know Job could have said, God, you're the one who took it all away from me. You see that thinking? I would think that way maybe if I was him, wouldn't you? Job had every right, I guess, or he had the possibility of saying, God, why would I turn to you? You're the very one who took this away from me. God, you're the one who said, Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Why in the world would I want to run to you, God? Everything within me tells me to run away from you. Couldn't he have had that response? But Eliphaz did not give that advice. He said, life's going to be trouble, brother. I'll tell you that, just as sure as the world. But I would seek God, and unto God I would commit my cause. Now you just nod. That's some pretty good advice. That's some pretty good advice. I think he gives some more good advice. You keep on reading, and by the way, verses 9 through 16, he just gives reasons why he would go to God. He said, man, he does great things, marvelous things. He sends rain. He does this. He does that. He does that. Those are just some reasons, my friend, why I would turn to God. But look at the advice he gives in verse number 17. I think he gives some more good advice. We just want to cash it all up as, or just add it all up as junk and trash it because we think these friends are crazy. I don't think so. I think there's some embellishing, there's some opinions they put in, and sure, we can address those, but let's not skip the truth. Look at what he says in verse number 17. He said, "Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth." Let me ask you this. How many of you liked getting whippings when you were little? Me either. Now I'm going to be honest, and if you hadn't gotten here, that's okay too, but eventually you will. How many of you are thankful for those whippings you got when you were young? I am. I remember my daddy slapped me one time. I'm so glad he slapped me. You know why he slapped me? And I knew it was coming. I've told you this before. He said, "Take your glasses off." He was probably thinking, because I paid for them, and if I break them, I'll have to pay for them again. You know what I had done? It was disrespectful to my mother. She said something to me, and I turned around and I popped back something to him, and he said, "Take your glasses off." And I took my glasses off, and he said, "You never speak to your mother that way." And he slapped me across my face. I'm thankful for that. You know who's probably done more for me in this world than anybody else is my mother. I mean that. I'm so glad my daddy popped me and wrung my jaws and said, "You do not disrespect your mother." I'm thankful for that. I'm happy now that I'm not some kind of disrespectful ingrate who speaks to my mother anyway. Let me tell you, I've sat in parent-teacher conferences and heard children speak to their kids, and I thought, if you ain't going to tear this kid up, boy, I'm going to give him a tongue lashing over the way he's spoken to his mother in this conference, or the way that this kid has regarded their parents. I'm happy that my daddy corrected me. And you know what I bet my daddy was thinking? Look, you going to go out here and call yourself a tucker? Then you ain't going to act a fool and be disrespectful. I'll tear that tail up. But you'll act right when people look at you and say, "That's Jim Tucker's daughter." And I am thankful for that. I'm happy that he whipped me with a belt and that he slapped me across my face only once. But I remember why too. And I was not disrespectful to my mother beyond that, or when I was, I thought about it. And Eliphaz said to Job, "Happy is the man that God corrects." In the same way, you ought to be happy that God will wake you up at night. And if He hadn't, well, maybe you ain't doing anything wrong, or maybe you're not His, but He'll wake me up and say, "Hey, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, the beginning of Christian is Christ, and that's my name. And you won't just act any old way. You won't talk to people like that and call yourself mine." Let me tell you something, girl. I straightened your tail up, and God has tore me up. Obviously not physically, but boy, His conviction on my heart, laying awake in the middle of the night. God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I think Eliphaz was right when he said, "Happy is the man whom God corrects." You know what it lets me know? And this is what the Bible said. It says that's what lets you know who your daddy is. That's what it says. And it uses that word. He said, "You're not bastards, you're sons." You don't question who your father is. You know who your father is. If you're mine, I'll straighten your heart up. Happy is the man that God corrects. Now that seems harsh. Y'all are all like,
Well,
y'all got different.
The problem most of us have with it is, what did Job do? What did he
I
do
didn't say he did anything.
correction?
I didn't say he did anything. Nothing did he do to need correction at this point. But is that not good advice? Because look at what he said. He said, "Despise not the chastening of the Almighty." Now, the question could be, well, what have I even done to deserve this? And I get that totally. I totally get that. But is not that still good advice? That if the Lord ever starts to correct you for something, you ought to be happy that He'll correct you, and you shouldn't despise it? I mean, would you not agree that that is good advice? Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is truly there. That he, at this point, had not done anything. And I agree with that. And the Lord makes that clear as well. But that's still good advice. It's still good advice that when the Lord corrects you, be happy about it. And don't despise the correction. And then look at what he says in verse number 18. I'm going to be honest. I think in verse number 18, Eliphaz knows something about this God he's talking about. Listen to what he says. He said, "He makes sore, but He binds up." Just don't even think about Job at this point. Just think about yourself. That's the truth about God. He might be the very one that broke you down to where you are and left you in your soreness. But He will bind you up. He said, He wounds, but His hands make whole. I don't know about you. I just got excited about those verses. I thought, yes, that's my God you're talking about. You nailed it with that. You might have been snarky about it. You might have thrown in some opinions, but I'm going to pick out truth and I'm going to call it what it is. That's truth, Eliphaz. That is truth. He said, He makes sore, but He binds up. Look, be thankful for that. God may allow, keyword allow, something to happen to you through no fault of your own, as Job happened here. Hey, He allowed it, but He'll bind you up. He may have allowed those wounds, but His hands will make whole. Look at verse number 19. He said, He will deliver you in 6 troubles, yea, in 7 there shall no evil touch thee. He said, why is He saying 6 and 7? Well, numbers in the Bible, they do mean something, and 7 is the number of completion. He said He'll keep you through 6 trials. Hey, let me just tell you that even in 7, and 7 is totality. He said, "Air one of them, He'll get you. Air one of them." He said, "The Lord will deliver you, and no evil will touch you." Isn't that true? Isn't that what came to pass in Job's life? So listen to what I'm saying. That's why I said, I'm going to give you a lesson that's a shocker, but hey, let me tell you something. I started praying this at youth camp. I had a conversation with Barbara Diego, and we sat out there at youth camp, and we talked about some things, and when I walked away from there, I started praying a prayer. I said, Lord, challenge my thinking. I said, challenge my thinking. That was my prayer. I started praying back in, I guess, July when we were at youth camp. I said, I want you to challenge my thinking. Anything that I think about you that's not right, I want you to challenge it, and I want you to change it. Now, all I'm doing this morning, isn't that what a good teacher does anyway? They would challenge your thinking about something. I'm just challenging your thinking. I'm saying that if all they were saying was trash, lies, and garbage, I don't know that the Lord would have allowed it to be recorded. But what they did is they did speak some truth. And there's a warning because they spoke truth and they tied in their own opinions. And God said, my wrath is against you, Eliphaz, Bildad, and whoever. I'm angry with you. And He said, you go get you something. You're going to make a sacrifice for what you've done. You've spoken things about me that were not true. And they did. I get that. But isn't there some good stuff to take away from this? There's some good truths. And I think that if I had a friend who came to me and said, Jennifer, you've helped other people. You've strengthened other people. Now, don't let it come to you and you faint under the trouble. Be strong and take your own advice. That's a good friend. And I think if I had a friend who came to me and said, look, don't question God's plan because you're not more just than your Maker, are you? Then that would make me think, I better not act like I am. And if I had a friend who said, hey, life's born into trouble, but here's what I'd do. I'd commit that trouble to God. I would appreciate that advice. And if I had a friend who said, you ought to be happy that God corrects you. It shows you that He's your Father. And He might make you sore, but He'll bind you up. He might allow wounds, but He'll heal those wounds. He'll deliver you out of every sin. I would appreciate that advice. I would appreciate that advice. Now, listen. I said at the beginning of this, it's not that I'm lacking empathy towards Job. It's hard to hear stuff like that. If you had just sat there and lost all 10 of your children, I can only imagine. I don't want you to take it that I'm all Job's friends camp over here and I'm anti-Job. No. But I'm saying that as a student of the Bible, let us separate it and let us say that there is truth, there is opinion. I want to find the truth, heed to the truth, and I want to know about the opinion that I can be warned from that as well. Now look at chapter 6. Eliphaz has had his 2 chapters to speak here. Chapter 4, chapter 5. Chapter 6, Job answers. And what's he say? He said, oh, that my grief were weighed and my calamity laid in the balances, it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. He said, I have so much grief right now, so much pain, and I'm going to say I can only imagine. But I want you to look at something else that Job said in verse number 14. To him that is afflicted, pity should be showed from his friend. Now listen, we can sit here and we could say, should he have spoken those things that he did to him? Well, he'd sat for 7 days and not said a darn word. That's comfort, my friends.
I think he didn't know what to say.
He probably didn't know what to say. And do you think that the advice that we looked at where he said, hey, life's trouble, but turn to God. Don't think you're more just than your Creator. God may wound you, but He'll hold you up. Is that so terrible to say to a man? I'm going to be honest with you. when I go into a situation where somebody's hurting or whatever and I've come to comfort them and to help them, I'm just going to be honest. I don't leave without saying something. Whether that's good or bad. I don't get off the... You call me and you tell me something's going on, I'm going to be honest. 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, I'll listen for a minute, but I'm going to say something, you know? And so Eliphaz did.
7 days, Eliphaz is, like, I kind of feel like he wants to have that empathy for him, and he did for that 7 days, and then he goes into it, like, with frustration, like, where's your faith? You had all this faith when it wasn't you that
sure.
this was happening to you. And yes, God took that away, or this happened to you, and now you have no faith. Why is that?
Absolutely. He questioned that.
You go through trials that aren't as bad as this one, but then whenever it's something that completely destroys you, you take that trial and you're done, you're depressed, you don't come out of it. So I think it's kind of, to me, it sounds like he's trying to have empathy, but he's frustrated. He's so frustrated.
But wouldn't it take a friend to look you in the eye and say that?
Right.
You've told me, I'm telling you, listen, it's not easy to have these conversations. You ever had somebody look you in the eye and say, you're making some mistakes right now? You better get yourself together and you better get your heart right with God. That's not easy to do. But if you love people, I said to somebody last week, 2 weeks ago, I said, when you love people, eventually you tell them the truth. Eventually you tell them the truth. I'm not saying, and listen, I don't want it, I'm not even saying, were they right or were they wrong? I'm just saying, there was truth in what they said. Sure, they threw in some opinions, and we don't even have to agree on were they right or were they wrong. I'm just saying, let's pick out the truth that we can, and let's learn from that truth. And here's the thing. I wouldn't take that from just anybody. I wouldn't take that from just anybody. But if somebody was my friend, could I not allow a friend to say to me, Jennifer Tucker, you have stood behind that lectern. You have said God's enough, God's enough, God's enough, and you're going to sit here and tell me He's not enough? That would be hard to hear, but I want somebody to say, you listen to your own words. Don't you just fall under the pressure. You heed your own advice. God is enough. And it's not easy to have those conversations with people. It's not easy to look somebody eyeball to eyeball who is a friend. Now see, friend is a key word. If you're not my friend and you want to come up and start instructing me, you're probably going to get, okay, appreciate it, but go on somewhere. That's probably what you're going to get. Now notice I didn't say appreciate. I learned that from verbal judo. It's appreciate it, but go on. That's a way to deflect conflict. And that's probably what I would say. But if a friend came to me and said, as hard as it is, are you in sin? Hey, that shows some genuine concern at least. That's a hard question. That's hard to receive, but hey, at least that's a friend who's not just going to lie to you. And let's move on. Let's look at verse number 25. Job said this. He said, how forcible are right words. Now, I want you to listen to what Job said. How forcible are right words. Now, here's a verse that came to my mind. Proverbs 27, verse 6. You know what Proverbs 27, verse 6 says? It says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. I'm not trying to get you to say his friends were right or his friends were wrong. I just think there's a lesson for us to be learned. It's friends who tell you the things that hurt you. And I'd be leery of somebody who all they do is just I wanted to do that since Reggie Sadler did that, so I got to do it in different contexts. But hey, oh, you're beautiful. Everything you're doing is great. Oh, you're great. You don't need to fix anything. You're my best friend. Everything you're doing is just right in line. I'd be a little leery because the Bible says, and Solomon in his wisdom, he said, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Listen, he put the word wound and friend together. But he said, deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. It's an enemy who will come up to you when you're involved in the biggest sin pit, sin fest you've ever been in and say, I think it's fine. I love you. I think you're fine. I mean, the Lord understands. The Lord understands. He's just going to... Can you tell I just want to kick that person? I mean, just stop. Stop. But it's a friend who says, you're making a mess. You better fix this. And I'm not saying Job was. I'm not saying he had done anything. I'm just saying that when he said how forcible are right words, I think he was right. It's forceful when some people are telling you the right words. But hey, we take it and turn over to chapter number 7. You know, chapter number 7, Job said in verse number 11, and I thought, okay, Job, he said, I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit, and I will complain in the bitterness of my soul.
Where are you?
I'm in Sunday school. Oh, I'm chapter 7, verse number 11.
Okay.
Hey, I'm not going to say anything. I just circled that verse and said, really, Job? I'm not even giving you an opinion. I don't know. Job said, I will not refrain my lips or my mouth. I'll speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of the soul. Am I well? Yes, he said that. All I'm asking you to do is not cast me off like I'm crazy, but I'm just saying, instead of just, put on your waders, girls, we gotta dig our way through the book of Job. Is there not some truth in there? Are there not some good words of advice that we can take from that? And hey, listen, this is what I'm asking you to do. Now, when you read further, can we do this right here? Can we say, I think that's truth, and I'm going to give him credit for that. I think that's true. Now, I think that's opinion. Easy now, that's opinion now. But can we read it with that mindset and become better students of the Word? And I'm not saying, I'm not saying anybody's not or anything like that, but can we just look at it in that way and say, I think, and this is my opinion, that I think that God had a problem with them because they took truth. Yes, they did. You can't tell me that when He said, God may make you sore, but He will bind you up. He wounds, but His hands make whole. He'll deliver you, and no evil will touch thee. You mean to tell me that's not truth about the God you serve? That's true. They did speak truth, but they spoke truth with opinion. So my challenge to you, read it and look for truth. Read it and look for opinion. And when you get to the end and you'll say, God said, you said some things about me that were not true of me, and my wrath is kindled against you, then you'll know what He's talking about. But Job said in verse number 11, I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I just want to say it again. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I well?
Mine says M-I-C.
Mine does too.
It says a sea or a well.
But what does that
A
mean?
sea or a
Citizen
well.
Watch
Mine
over
says
me.
sea or sea serpent.
Oh, sea serpent. There you go. Am I a sea serpent?
Yeah, well, funnier.
A well's funnier. I don't know what that means, and we can come back to that later. I didn't study that. But look at verse. Am I fat? Do I look that big to you?
Ate everything.
I don't know about that. Yeah. I've been so sad, I've eaten everything. That would be a woman. I don't know. This is a...
Yeah.
Right. And he said that thou settest a watch over me. So he's commenting, did you come just to kind of observe the sea or to like watch wells or whatever? He said, because verse 13, he said, when I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint. Hey, yeah, I speak that language, Go climb back in it. He said, then you scare me with dreams, you terrify me through visions. Verse number 15, look at what he said. He said, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than life. He literally said, I'd rather be strangled than listen to you. But I'm just asking you, was there some truth? Can we take truth from it? I'm not saying, Job should have. No. I'm just saying us, when we read this, can't chalk it all up as just, a bunch of wrongness. But there is some truth there that definitely can be seen. And that takes us to the end of
when
number
he's
7.
asking these things like about when you're complaining, I'd rather choke you. Is he talking to his friend?
Yes, he talks to Eliphaz
Not
like
talking
that.
to.
Kind of like right now. I'd rather just be strangled than
listen to what you're telling me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Here's the thing, and I'll end with this because it's time. I'll end with this. I'm just saying that when you read through Job, it actually's kind of interesting. And don't just think, gosh, big 42 chapter argument. Good Lord, I feel like I'm listening to a couple arguing or something. I mean, golly. And they're crazy anyway, but try to look through it. And when the friends are speaking, try to separate what was truth and then where did they mix in their opinion. And I know God says, I'm angry for doing that, and I get that. But see it, and hey, let me tell you, spoiler alert, boy, in chapter 38, I'm going to whisper, because it's a secret. Chapter 38, God's going to start asking questions. Mm-hmm. And he's like, in chapter 38, verse number 3, this is what they call like a hook. I just want y'all to keep reading. Look at what he says. Shh. He says, gird up your loins like a man, Job.
Quit being a baby.
I will demand of thee, and you'll answer me. He said, I'm about to start asking the questions now. And do you know that for 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, God said, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you when I laid the cornerstone and when the morning stars sang together? And who shuts the doors of the sea? And who made the clouds? And this is where you hear about dinosaurs. And he said, who made the constellations and named them, boy? Answer me. And it makes me nervous to think, but Jehovah starts asking questions eventually. And man, this Job's good, okay? So y'all stick in there, and I'm not crazy, I'm just saying, okay? If you don't like anything I said, trash it.